All right, let's just get this out there. This is our very first episode of the Pomegranate and the Mic. I'm Angel, your host, your midnight confidant, and your personal guide through the underworld that is, in fact, dark romance, okay? I'm low-key nervous, kind of excited, and definitely wearing jeans that belong in the wash, okay? But this is a judgment-free zone. Judgment-free. Whew. So here we are, starting this whole thing off by talking about something that is maybe a little unexpected, maybe totally worth it though. I don't know about you guys if you guys are fans of horror erotica, but it has really been growing on me, and I want to talk about why it is potentially the genre of the summer. Let's forget about the usual beach reads and yacht billionaires for a second. I want to talk about stories that are dripping in sweat and tension and a little bit of blood. You know what I'm saying? I'm not gonna lie. Nothing says summer like a little danger mixed with your desire. That's all a part of summer's charm, right? The unknown. And summertime is the time where you imagine people having these summertime flings, these one-off occasions with men they'll never see again. So why not have a summer fling with horror erotica? I'm just saying. Let's actually talk about why summer is made for horror erotica, okay? So here's the deal. Summer isn't just about sun hats and fruity drinks, though I love those, okay? I'm a very big fan of lemon drops. I am a sucker for a good lemon drop, and maybe we should create a horror erotica themed universal lemon drop. But anywho, summer is this wild summertime sweaty beast, okay? It is hot enough to make your sheets stick to you in all the wrong ways. And just as that's about to start happening, your brain starts having these cooling down cravings, correct? When I'm super hot, you want to know what I go for? A nice ice cold water or a good sorbet, okay? While I'm not the biggest ice cream girl, I love a good sherbet. Let me tell you something, delicious. And with all those cravings, you also crave intensity, right? That summertime thrill that I was just talking about, the unknown. Your body and your mind automatically wants to seek it out in the summertime. That's why the summer seems the most fun, right? So, although heat makes everything stickier, your clothes, your skin, your emotions, your attention does shift during this time. You end up kind of craving stories that reflect that same sticky, restless, can't sit still energy. I feel like I can't sit still right now. And think about it, it makes sense, right? Those classic horror settings. Potentially a cabin off the grid, no cell service, just you and your maybe not so friendly neighbors in a small little beach town. No, thank you. When you think of all those very isolating settings, that's the theme. In summer horror, it's isolation. And isolation in the summertime feels different because that's typically a season where you're going out with your friends, you're going out clubbing more, partying, open to bars, the beach, vacations, trips, and you're always around people. So the theme of isolation being the summertime horror setting, but it being the complete opposite of what we practice in our real lives is so interesting. And you'll hear me talk a lot about that in this podcast episode, about the opposites of horror erotica versus what we're talking about. And the reason that this is so important is because isolation is lonely. And in its loneliness, you get this charged intensity with it, like a live wire, right? When you're reading about people in these very isolated, sketchy settings, wondering, well, what are they going to do? What are they not going to do? That's an intense amount of energy. And horror erotica taps into that electric energy perfectly. Plus, let's not forget summer nights themselves, okay? They're long, humid, and alive with both possibility and danger, okay? There is this primal part of us that hears cicadas, and knows something gross or wild is lurking out there. And whether that's outside or maybe inside of us, there is darkness. I'm a born and raised New York City girl. And when I go outside walking at night in the summertime, although it is a little bit sketchy because there's not that many people outside because they're probably like out at the clubs or out at the bars, and I tend to go walking really, really late. It's so interesting because I don't necessarily feel unsafe like I typically would in like the fall or the winter time. There's just something that comes with those darker months that I feel like adds to the spookiness of everything. And in summer, I don't get that feeling. However, when I read horror erotica, I do. When I read any kind of horror or watch any kind of horror movie in the summertime, there's both a feeling of excitement and fear. And I feel like that's different when I watch movie scenes that are placed in the wintertime or in the fall or even the spring. But the summertime, I do feel a little bit more excitement. And I don't know if that's just because of the heat heightening your emotions and heightening everything within you, but it's pretty interesting. Horror erotica in the summer is like the perfect storm for your brain, right? You've got the heat, the tension, the danger, and this like need and desire for something raw, real, and a little wicked, whether that is literally in your personal life or in what you read. Because you always have more fun in the summertime. So why not take the risk? And while taking a risk can be new for us, there is actually a scientific and biological reason why fear and lust make us feel a little more driven, right? So before we get too deep into spooky, sexy stories, I do want to talk science for a second, because what makes horror erotica work and why it hits that sweet spot in our gut is actually rooted in our brain, y'all. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when your heart is pounding and you're scared, you can also be turned on. And if you read dark romance, more specifically genres like horror erotica, slasher romances, you have both the excitement and the fear because you're not sure what you're going to read. And while it can feel like a really odd feeling that might be unique to you, the truth is that it's not uncommon at all. It is literal biology. And I want to give you the lowdown, okay? So both fear and arousal light up the same spot in your brain. It's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is this little almond-shaped part of your brain that is your brain's like, oh shit alert system, right? It's your brain's warning system in a sense. And it tells you when something's dangerous, but also when your body's revving up for something scandalous. You know what I'm saying? When you're getting in the mood or worked up with your partner, your brain lights up in that same exact spot. In 2016, there was a neuroscience journal that actually researchers had found that people's brains responded to both scary and sexy stimuli in overlapping ways. So basically, your brain can't necessarily differentiate between when you have to run for your life and when you're getting really worked up with your partner. It just senses excitement in general, and so your body automatically responds. Isn't that interesting? That two opposing feelings can cause the same spot in your brain to get triggered and to light up. The biology behind that is absolutely insane. So if you've ever felt like it was a one-off feeling, or you couldn't understand it, or you felt concerned about the fact that you could be turned on by the fear, trust me, there is literal science to prove that you are not the only person in the world to feel that way. Now, why does this matter specifically for horror erotica? It matters because when you're reading about a monster or a ghost or even a stalking main character, someone who's obsessive, possessive, and does the most unhinged and absolutely deranged things, your brain is on edge and your heart is racing. And your brain can't tell the difference between being turned on in the moment or being a little scared. it combines those two emotions, which leaves you with that very heightened mix. And it causes your senses to sharpen. When you throw in erotic tension to the mix, your brain flips the switch. And fear heightens arousal, and arousal heightens fear. So it ends up being this entire feedback loop of emotions just bouncing off of each other continuously again and again and again. And it makes you always want to go back for more. There was another neuroscientist from Harvard, and he talks about in his book, I think it's called The Aesthetic Brain, that your brain loves high intensity emotions. And I feel like anybody with high intensity emotions could tell you the exact same thing. Your brain keeps going back to these feelings again and again and again and again. So when these two very intense feelings happen together, your brain cranks up your dopamine and your adrenaline levels. And what that means is that your body's cocktail party is going. She's zooming, okay? She is dialed all the way up to 10, and she is that live wire we were just talking about. And if you've ever heard the term adrenaline junkie for people who are obsessed with getting on roller coasters or doing really scary adventures or activities like bungee jumping, skydiving, people who chase these feelings again and again and again, it's because when you do something that excites you to that level, your adrenaline is all the way up and dopamine is increased by 20 when you do it successfully, right? And so when you're reading horror erotica on a hot summer night and your pulse is racing because of the plot and maybe the bedroom scene, your brain is doing this one big happy dance. And that's science, baby, okay? That is pure science. So if you're feeling these emotions and you're concerned, don't be. It's science. Now that we've got the science out of the way, let's talk about some summer horror tropes that just make sense for horror erotica in the summertime. It's all about that isolation that we talked about before, mixed in with intimacy, right? Summer's got this way of locking you in. And in terms of settings and tropes, like micro tropes, that's a phone with no cell service, a mysteriously locked door, a small town where everybody's got secrets. So I wrote down a few settings that make sense to be gold for horror erotica in the summertime. And I want to see more horror erotica with these settings. They give you horror, but I also want that dangerously sexy aspect to it because I don't just want to read horror. I'm not a big horror girly, but horror erotica I can do. There is a big distinction. So I wrote down 4 for you. A haunted lake house with creaky floors and mirrors that fog up just right. I love movies about ghosts and the occult and something spooky. And when you have like that frosted mirror after a shower in the dead of night and the characters wipe their hand across the glass, I'm expecting some eyes to be in that mirror and a ghost to be standing behind them. Number 2, a beach town with its 2 friendly locals who know way too much. If I'm going to a small town to start my new life, nice and fresh, I don't want to know nobody knows me or my history, but somehow my neighbors know way too much information about the people who lived here before me and are keeping it under lock and key. That would piss me off so bad. And although I hate to see it, I love the fact that I get upset about the fact that I do see it. Because why can't you just tell me who died in this house? Why can't you tell me that the family who lived here before me left because they were being haunted? Like, why can't you be upfront? It slightly gives miscommunication trope, and that's not my favorite. However, I would like to see it, and I would like to see it in a horror erotica novel today. Thank you. The third setting that I have for you is a remote cabin where the power goes out right before things start getting bananas. And by bananas, I mean they start hearing noises, they start hearing banging on the door, they start seeing things out of the corner of their eyes. Bananas. And although it could be a ton of things, what I also want to see in a horror erotica novel is after all that banging happens, it gets like that eerily quiet silence that we see in the movies. And all of a sudden, I want the ghost to, boom, appear somewhere. I want the stalker to bang down that door. I want them coming from a little crack in the basement. You know what I'm saying? I want to see those things. I want to see it. Like, imagine an obsessive, possessive main character sneaking their way through your house after scaring the living daylights out of you, giving you both that fear and lust. Yeah, The fourth setting that I have for you that I think offers a plethora of microtropes is, imagine this, an island in the middle of nowhere where the locals tell you not to swim in the ocean after dark or swim in a lake after dark. I don't know about you. I'm not getting in that lake. I am not getting in that ocean. If I cannot see my feet, I'm not getting in. It's just not happening. I don't like it. So I would like to read it in a book because I'm going to be hollering at my book like, girl, why did you get in that water? Why would you do that to yourself? They said don't do it, and you did it anyway. God. See, I'm already getting worked up, and the story is not even written yet as far as I know. These 4 settings, right? Say an author was going to write about them. You could throw in so many micro tropes in here that they are so fun to play around with. I want to see all these written into horror erotica books. So if you're a listener and you write a book with any of these in them, let me know. I will arc read that book for you, I promise you. And something that all of these settings offer is a trap. They all are meant to trap the characters some way, somehow, whether that is physically or emotionally. There's no escape. And that also cranks up the stakes. And who doesn't like high stakes when you're reading horror erotica? I want them the highest. Because I'm not a big fan of angst in movies, but angst in books, I want it immediately. And I want it now, okay? I want it now. Now, adding on to the stakes, imagine adding tension and attraction into the mix. It ends up being messy, urgent, and electric. Plus, summer is when everyone's just a little raw. A little more raw. I think that's the word. We all end up being this much closer to the edge because we're sweating through our clothes, and that mood is perfect for where danger and desire blur. And let's be real, there is something so undeniably sexy about someone who might be a literal monster, but also happens to be really, really good at kissing, okay? I want to read a hot makeout scene. That's all I want, especially in a horror erotica. Toss that in somewhere. It doesn't have to be all smut, but toss in a good kissing scene. Give me one good one in each horror erotica novel I read, and I think I would be content. That would check off all my little tiny horror erotica check boxes. Here's the thing with summer. It is big, loud, and often very exhausting. Horror erotica somehow feels like the opposite. And the reason I emphasize how many opposites we come across with horror erotica in the summertime is because opposites attract. That's why they pair so well together. Because horror erotica is like this party in the back room. It's a secret, it's hush hush, it's dark, there are candles lit, the music's real low, and it's the kind of night you don't want to end. Sometimes when I'm at the club in the summertime and it gets too hot, I'm ready to go early. So keep that in mind, because this is absolutely a genre that lets you indulge in the darker side of summer, because your summer is bright and fluffy and beautiful and sunny. And this genre, whether it's the forbidden aspect of it or the danger aspect, it stays with you. And it stays with you because power dynamics in this genre often get blurred. The lines are blurred very easily and very frequently. And what I mean by that is that pleasure is often more risk related than it is comfort, than it is safety. And that can get a little sticky. Hence why I would like to take the opportunity to stress that reading your trigger warnings is the most paramount before jumping into a horror erotica. That is the first thing you want to touch on. Even before you can purchase a book, even before you download it on Kindle Unlimited, you should have access to the beginning pages of a book. Whether that's on Kindle Unlimited, try a sample first and see if you can view the trigger warnings that way. Or if you're buying a book in store, see what the trigger warnings are. If you're buying a book online and not from Amazon, but directly from an author or a bookstore, then see if they list the trigger warnings somewhere there or somewhere on the author's website, because you want to make sure you are setting yourself up for the safest reading experience possible. I would hate for you guys to listen to this podcast and not take my advice on the trigger warnings. They are extremely, extremely, extremely important. And to quickly deviate from the topic at hand, I do want to stress this because recently, I want to say about a month or so ago, I read a book and I didn't read the trigger warnings for it. And it was a book I happened to do a content pull for an author. And that book absolutely messed me up badly. And it was because I hadn't prepared myself for a safe experience. And I didn't realize it would throw me off so quickly. But I was so thrown off for about a week and some change. And I almost couldn't pinpoint where those emotions had come from until I had realized, hey, I didn't set myself up for a safe reading experience. So I say all that to say, in dark romance, it is important to read your trigger warnings. In horror erotica, it is important to read your trigger warnings. In any kind of romance, don't skip over that page. Even if it's a blanket warning, prepare yourself accordingly. Unless you're a masochist, then go in blind and do you, boo. Getting back to why horror erotica sticks with you. It sticks with you because even though reading a book is a temporary experience, those feelings stay with you forever. No matter what book you read. Even if you didn't like it, even if you didn't finish it, you're going to remember why you didn't like that book. You're going to hold on to that feeling and say, hey, I didn't like that. Whether it was for the author, the plot, or the texture of the pages. I am a big page texture person. And let me tell you, I have, unfortunately, rated books lower by a point because I did not like the texture of the page. That's on me. That's on me. I did it one time because there was only one book I can think of, and I won't tell you guys because it was a pretty good book. It was a good story. But yeah, the pages threw me off, threw me for a loop, and I don't know what that is. I just didn't like the pages of that book. Sue me. Don't. I digress. So, staying on theme with reading being a temporary experience, summer is also temporary. It is the most fleeting season we have all year because even though summer just started, I feel like it's almost over. We're not even a month into it. We still have 2 months and some change before it's over, but to me, we're halfway done. And that just goes to show you that these experiences and this season go hand in hand. Do with that information what you will. And when you close that book and you're left with this rush, the kind that ends up being equal parts adrenaline, equal parts satisfaction, let me know how that goes. It's almost like sneaking out past curfew and living to tell the tale. I've never snuck out past curfew because I was a really good kid. But I can only imagine that's what that feels like, right? All that excitement and that rush and that adrenaline with doing something successfully, sneakily. I can only imagine how heightened that feels. And to me, that's what I would assume reading horror erotica is comparable to. Because when I read horror erotica and I'm done reading the book, it's like a reward. It feels like this insane accomplishment, and I would like a gold sticker. Maybe I'll start giving myself gold stickers for reading horror erotica because I like them. I think they're fun. I think they're nuts. And the visceral reactions I get from reading these books is insane. I used to rate things on a very specific scale for my physical written reviews on the blog. However, I have steered away from that for a while now because I prefer to rate books on if I had a visceral reaction to it. Whether I liked the plot or I didn't, whether I fell for the characters or I didn't, it's about, did I gasp? Did I guffaw? Was my mouth ajar for half the book? Did I scream? Did I cry? Did I want to toss the book? Did I visibly curse at the characters, although they cannot hear me? I'm giving that book 5 stars. Don't care. Don't care. It's getting 5 stars because if you got a reaction out of me, especially in public, oh, you've won. If I've ever reacted to your book that way, I would just like to say, you ate, and if I could give you a Michelin star, I would. Thank you. So although the genre is very messy, very imperfect, it is exactly the kind of summer fling that you secretly want. You want to be feeling all the emotions because you want to carry them into every single season after the fact. You want to have a story to tell your friends for decades to come. That's what a summer fling gives you. It gives you something to look back on with such positivity, and that is what horror erotica in the summertime is going to bring you, I promise. Let me tell you, my first experience reading a horror erotica novel happened when I first started my Bookstagram journey 2 years ago. And what ended up happening, I just thought it was a dark romance, right? I also probably didn't read accordingly. And when I was accepted for the ARC, it was my very first ARC team that I was ever accepted to. And it was for Harley Beck. And the book was Sinister Legacy. And let me tell you, that book was an absolute mind screw. Okay? It messed me up so good in the best of ways. And I remember that being the first real video review I had filmed for my Bookstagram and my TikTok pages. And I loved every single second and moment of that book. It was bananas. It was bonkers. And because I read it as an e-arc, I had never purchased the copy myself, but I stayed a big fan of Harley Beck. And recently, the book box company Dark and Disturbed released a collection of books. I can't remember what the collection was for or why, but Sinister Legacy was in their special edition covers for that release, and I was over the moon when I was able to get my hands on that book, because going from ARC team reader to special edition holder feels like such a journey for me, and that is so exciting. That is so freaking exciting to me. So even though I don't have an original copy of the book, I do in fact have the special edition, and I couldn't be happier to have that on my shelves. And another horror erotica book that I read by Harley Beck actually was Come Out Wherever You Are, and I was actually able to ARC read that as well. So Come Out Wherever You Are is supposed to be a Halloween themed horror story, and I kid you not, it is in fact that, but it is also a mindfuck. Like, she does them so insanely well. I'm gonna recommend her for the rest of my day. Now, with that being said, I have also read some traumances and some other horror erotica books, but I'm gonna give you 3 books that I currently have on my TBR that I cannot wait to get into. So the first one that is up on my TBR is called A la Folie by Nova Kane. Yes, the author's name is Nova Kane. That has got to be the coolest author name I've seen. It's giving Alexa play Nova Kane by Frank Ocean, because that's just cool. That is a cool kid name. So shout out to author Nova Kane. You have a really cool name. And just to give you some details on A la Folie, it is book 1 of the Cirque du Désir series. It says it's book 1 of 3, which is cool. If you like A la Folie, then you can keep up on the series, which is really great. And it's an erotic horror circus romance. I'm not a big fan of clowns, but I would read this because everyone who reads it loves it. Very exciting. It is only 124 pages, which seems like it'll be pretty quick to get through. And I remember why I liked this even more is that it released a day before my birthday last year. So it released on February 19th of 2024. My birthday is February 20th. So, big fan. I'm not sure if books 2 and 3 are out yet. Oh, looks like they are. So book 2 is Maison de Fou, and book 3 is Ma Petite Mort. My Little Death, I think is what that means. Maison de Fou sounds like House of something. I don't know. But Maison de Fou is also pitch black horror erotica. So cool. It's staying on theme with book 1. So you'll be able to check that out. And the second book that I cannot wait to get into is Skins by Audrey Rush. So if I'm not mistaken, this could totally be the wrong information. So don't take this as Bible or law. But if I'm quite certain, I believe she had published Skin. I think the book was just Skin, and it got banned on Amazon or Kindle. Maybe I'm making that up, y'all. I don't know why. That is just something that I feel like I saw her post. But Skins is actually multiple horror stories kind of in a collection. And the original, it says here, the original short story Skin is also in here. Hence why new title, but similar title. I want to get into it because the way she posts about it is like it gives gross. And I don't know why, but I want to read it because I feel like I need a good visceral reaction. I need to be like, ugh. So I'm excited to get into that. I don't know if I will read all the stories besides Skin because Skin is the only one I really want to get into. And I'm not too sure about what else is in there. And then final book that I want to, give a shout out to and tell you guys it's on my TBR is Slash or Pass by Tyler Page. I have not read any of Tyler Page's books, but Slash or Pass gets rave reviews because it is a slasher dark horror romance. And it has a masked man. So if you're a big fan of that, I would say check it out. It's also MFM, so that's cool. I like that. It says it's told in the style of classic slasher horror movies. And if you like cheap thrills, fast pacing, and spooky, scary absurdity of a slasher, but wish there was a little spice added, you're going to enjoy this book. I like that. I also recently acquired the Blackout Romance special edition of Slasher Pass. So I have the cool special edition. It looks very, very sexy up on my top shelf. And I'm not sure how I found out about Tyler Page. I think I may have heard about the author when they were first coming out with Slasher Pass and putting ARC applications out. But I do know that I follow their newsletter and big fan of this author's newsletter. When they post their newsletter, it always gives you really cool information. And some of the things that I've recently pulled from their newsletter is actually other author recommendations. So I'm not sure if it was from like newsletter swaps that they had done, but I had found like 3 new to me authors that I had never heard of before. And I thought that was really, really cool. And the blog post that I had written actually shouted out Tyler Page's newsletter. So if you get a chance or you like signing up for author newsletters because you want to find out, which new indie, dark romance, or horror erotica authors to check out, you should absolutely sign up for their newsletter. That's a 10 out of 10 for me. But with that being said, with those 3 books on my TBR and the books I told you I already loved, I hope you guys have quite a few horror erotica authors to check out. And if you happen to have any horror erotica authors that you want to see us review on the Library of Angels website, what you should do is head on over to www.libraryofangels.com, on over to the contact page, and in that form, just put that you were sent over from the Pomegranate and The Mic and you want to submit a book for the team to review. And make sure it's a horror erotica, and we'll see what we can do. So, That's it. That's a wrap on our official dive into the Pomegranate and the Mic. We talked sweat, fear, lust, and why horror erotica is secretly summer's best kept secret, y'all. So, thanks for hanging out and for sweating through this episode with me and for letting me nerd out about stuff that makes me really, really excited. And if you're into this vibe and you liked how episode 1 went, you're going to want to stay tuned for episode 2. And soon we're going to start having guests on the podcast, which is even more exciting. So make sure to subscribe, review, tell your shady best friend, or just send me a message about what you'd like to see on the podcast. And if you happen to have a request for who we bring on the podcast or a podcast topic you want me to touch on in the dark romance genre and universe, go on and head on over to www.libraryofangels.com/the Pomegranate and the Mic, and you will find a form at the bottom of the page where you'll be able to submit any topics or items that you want us to touch on the podcast. And if you do submit a topic and it is accepted, you will get a shout out on the podcast. So stay tuned for that and make sure to submit a topic. You want to know what we're heading into next week? I guess you'll just have to stay tuned. Make sure to follow us on Instagram at the Pomegranate and the Mic to get a little sneak peek about what's coming next week. See you then.